Dr. Danieli, yes, please proceed with the presentation.
Sorry, I was still on mute, and when the slideshow is on, I cannot unmute myself. So I think I ended here, no? So I'll proceed. Actually, very close to the end now. Because now I've been talking a lot about Imagine IC and the way we've been trying to tackle together in participation different collecting issues and to see how participative ways of thinking can rethink and reshape collecting practices. So bringing it back to COMCOL, I finally want to highlight one of our projects in the realization to our search to find new balances in contemporary collecting, where practice, theory, and ethics are revisited. So as the worldwide response of museums was to start often online projects to collect the Corona crisis. I think somebody was on. We noticed that this actually was a great way where everybody started to work on a similar topic, but it also highlighted some flaws in the traditional way we did collecting. So the global phenomena also make clear that this way of collecting is different from our traditional practice. Hence, it showed challenges and spiked ethical questions about the way of collecting. COMCOL works at the moment in partnership with IC Ethics in a solidarity project. Together with institutions spread over several continents, we organize roundtables to discuss the ethics of collecting in times of crisis. The project is called Collecting with Care, Ethics in Museum Work. As right from the beginning of the global crisis, many museums developed projects to collect the pandemic and record this extraordinary situation. Some institutions had already worked on contemporary collecting and they relied on these collecting efforts in their previous experiences. However, this is not the case everywhere. On the other hand, even institutions that did have experience in contemporary collecting were facing challenges regarding the ethics that this new situation has brought to individuals and to institutions. Think of showing transparency of goals, collecting protests, hate or harmful material, rights and permissions, a minimization of harm, representation of historically marginalized groups that hit the hardest by the pandemic, collecting with sensitivity, collecting in an environmental, sustainable way. And what we actually hope to achieve with this project is to get more insights on how we can do this together, how we can exchange our doubts and our pitfalls, and how we can balance and come to collecting when we, of course, it is important that somehow we document these phenomena, but that we do it in a careful way and in a sensitive way, both for our staff, but also for the people that we include. So this is actually bringing me to my final words. I've tried to highlight how in our daily practice at Imagine IC, in partnerships, we with others define the act of collecting. I embrace in that the thought that museums should not per se acquire, but collect. This way of thinking creates space to rethink and search for new ideas on collecting and collections. You can consider this talking semantics, which it is. And it's exactly what is needed in this discussion. being word sensitive. How can we use our collections in our practices of collecting to understand contemporary societies and find ways to shape our futures together? Rethink what safeguarding means, what ownership entails, and how by passing ownership on or by returning acts of care can be formulated. To be open to listen to others, to critically reflect on how things were done in the past and how we can better this. For me, collecting is identifying, sharing, temporary holding to show, research in togetherness, and leaving things in situ. So how collecting can become an act of collective care in which the human and not the object is center. For this, I feel we need to be better listeners. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Danieli. This is such a beautiful concept because yes, museums are all about acquiring and understanding about collecting. This idea sounds like really nice. Thank you very much for the presentation. Next we have, we have Honorable Session Leader, Dr. El Mosco. So she is the curator at History, Anthropology, and History Institute at Mexico. Without further delaying, let me invite Dr. El. Welcome, Dr. El.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Well, I will start the presentation.
Please.
I don't know. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Bueno, buenos días a todas y todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación a este foro, principalmente al Dr. Javed Mohammed y a los organizadores de este evento. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this forum, especially to Dr. Javed and the organizer of this event. Yo voy a hablar en idioma español y voy a hacer una breve, ¿cómo se llama? Voy a hacer una breve síntesis en inglés, esperando que me pueda explicar a la mayoría del auditorio. I will speak in Spanish mostly and shortly in English, hoping that I can explain myself to the mostly of the audience. Como dijo nuestra querida Mina, mi nombre es Alejandra Mosco Jaimes, soy curadora, soy mexicana, curadora del Museo Regional de Guadalajara del Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia en México. My name is Alejandra, as Mina tells us. I am Mexican. I am curator of history in the Regional Museum of Guadalajara, which is part of the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico. Bueno, yo voy a presentar una ponencia titulada El poder de los museos son sus visitantes. I'm going to present a paper entitled The Power of Museums are the Museum's Visitors. Ok, yo preparé esta presentación organizándola en 3 preguntas centrales, que es ¿por qué el poder de los museos? ¿Por qué digo que el poder de los museos son sus visitantes? ¿Por qué los trabajadores de museos debemos dar importancia a los visitantes? ¿Y por qué debemos hacer museos pensados en los visitantes? Ok, this presentation is organized in 3 key ideas or 3 key questions. Why is the power of museums are the museum's visitors? Why should museums work as give importance to the visitors? And should we make museums with our visitors' mind? Bueno, voy a comenzar con la primera pregunta. I will start with the first question. Bueno, para empezar, habría que preguntarnos, ¿cómo se llama? Habría que preguntarnos qué es lo que regularmente encontramos en los museos, ¿no? Regularmente encontramos objetos, colecciones, todo el conocimiento que se genera dentro del museo y, por supuesto, visitantes. Okay, let's think at first, we can be found in the museums. Well, firstly, collections, objects, all the knowledge produced in the museum, and obviously visitors. Bueno, pero ¿qué pasaría si no tuviéramos visitantes? What would happen if we have no visitors? Bueno, ¿qué pasaría? Tendríamos nuestros almacenes con colecciones muy seguras y bien cuidadas. Well, first we would have our collection in warehouses. Pero ¿qué pasaría también en las salas de exposiciones? Bueno, pues lo mismo, tendríamos unas salas muy lindas, muy limpias, impecables. In our exhibition halls, we could be remain beautiful and spotless. Las colecciones se seguirían conservando, pero ¿realmente eso es lo que queremos? The collections continue in perfect condition, but is really that we want? Entonces, ¿qué le da realmente sentido a los museos? Then, what gives meaning to any museum? Creo que sin lugar a dudas son los visitantes, porque sin visitantes los museos no tienen sentido. Without visitors, the museum makes any sense. ¿Realmente? Really? Bueno, en ese sentido era mi intención de decir por qué son importantes o por qué los visitantes son lo más importante. Ahora voy a tratar de responder a la pregunta, ¿por qué los trabajadores de museos debemos dar importancia a los visitantes? Why should the museum's workers give importance to the visitors? Bueno, quisiera también contextualizar esta presentación en el contexto de la pandemia, los museos durante la pandemia. I will talk about the museums during the pandemic. Los museos del mundo se pusieron a prueba durante la pandemia por COVID-19. Una buena parte de los museos permanecieron cerrados por casi 2 años. En su mayoría, las colecciones estuvieron seguras y bien resguardadas. Pero ¿qué sentido tenía entonces tener un museo cerrado y sin visitantes? The museums around the world, well, museums during the pandemic. The museums around the world had to endure the COVID-19 pandemic. The museums were closed for almost 2 years. For the most part, the collections were safe and well protected. But what is the point of a closed museum without visitors? Bueno, aunque muchos museos, sobre todo los que tuvieron los recursos y la infraestructura, hicieron muchas actividades en línea. Por ejemplo, hicieron visitas virtuales, charlas con curadoras y curadores, acercamientos a las piezas, cosas que regularmente no se pueden hacer en un museo. Pero muchos otros no estaban preparados para migrar al mundo virtual. Although many museums, thus, with the best resources, carry out many activities online, like virtual visits, talks with curators, close-ups of the masterpieces, etc. But many others were not prepared to migrate to the virtual world. También durante esta crisis de COVID y durante esta crisis de la pandemia, muchos museos recortaron sus presupuestos. Además, sin visitantes, pues también hubo recorte de personal de museos. During the COVID crisis, lots of museums had their budgets cut. With the visitors, personnel were released also. Sin visitantes, museos públicos y privados se quedaron sin recursos por venta de boletos y otras actividades que están directamente relacionadas con los públicos. Without visitors, public and private museums do not receive the same resources related to the ticket sale and other collateral come from the visitors. Además, durante la pandemia, compañeros especialistas y trabajadores de museos, al igual que millones de personas, perdieron la vida. In addition, during the pandemic, especially some museum workers, as well as millions of people, lost their lives. Entonces, ¿por qué debemos hacer museos pensados en nuestros visitantes? Then, what should we make museums with our visitors in mind? Bueno, aquí vemos la diferencia entre un museo sin visitantes y con visitantes. We can see the difference between a museum with no visitors and with visitors. Ok, ¿qué tanto realmente los museos nos hemos interesado en conocer a nuestros públicos? Los públicos han estado presentes desde que los museos se volvieron públicos. Los estudios de público, es decir, estudiar cómo se comportan, tienen una larga historia. Alrededor de 100 años atrás se empezaron a hacer las primeras propuestas y estudios de público. Are we really interested in meeting our visitors? The visitors have been present in the museum since they became public. The visitor studies have a long story. About 10 years ago, since the first proposals for public. ¿Qué tanto entonces nos hemos interesado? En la tradición museológica parece haber un cambio en los últimos años. Parece ser que estamos pensando en hacer museos cada vez menos centrados en las colecciones y cada vez más centrados en los públicos. Esto se escucha mucho en el discurso, pero ¿esto es verdad? ¿No? In the museological tradition, there seems to be a change. The museums have been focused on collection traditionally, but now it is urgent that they focus on the visitors. But this is true. En el caso de para hacer estudios de público, para conocer a nuestros públicos, estudiar a los públicos en los museos y sitios patrimoniales, creemos que implica al menos dos partes. Conocer al público, saber quiénes son, por qué visitan los museos, qué se llevan de su visita, cómo se comprometen o involucran con la conservación del patrimonio y nosotros como museos, ¿qué les estamos comunicando? About visitor studies in museums and heritage sites involves two parts. First, getting to know the public, knowing who are they, what do they visit museums or sites, what do they take away from the visit, how are they engaged or involved in heritage conservation, and two, what are we communicating to them? Ahora más que nunca tenemos que pensar en nuestros visitantes. Tenemos que crear a partir de los resultados de esos estudios de público, crear estrategias que estén realmente centradas en las necesidades e intereses de los visitantes. Tenemos que aprender a habilitar los espacios para los múltiples públicos, empoderar a nuestros visitantes, hacerlos partícipes de los procesos y que se sientan representados. Now, more than ever, we must think about our visitors. We need to emphasize the needs and interests of our visitors. We need to make spaces available for multiple kinds of visitors. Finally, we also need to empower our visitors, make them participate in the process, make them feel represented. Bueno, ahora voy a las reflexiones finales. La pandemia de COVID-19 dejó muchas enseñanzas alrededor del mundo. Yo creo que para nuestros museos, la principal fue que las personas somos lo más importante. Primero, preservar la vida para preservar nuestro patrimonio y preservar nuestra memoria. El poder de los museos son sus visitantes, es decir, nosotros las personas, porque somos quienes les damos sentido, significado y valor a las colecciones y al patrimonio. Okay, closing remarks. The COVID-19 pandemic left many lessons around the world. I think the main lesson for us was that the people are the most important asset, preserving our lives in order to preserve our heritage and our memory. The power of museums are their visitors. This is the people, because we are ones who give meaning, significance, and value to the collections and our heritage. Okay, muchas gracias por su atención. Many thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. L, for the presentation. It's a very, very insightful presentation regarding the current issue that is going on with the COVID. Thank you very much. Let me invite our first presenter now. We have Mr. Michael Milanowski from Poland. He's the director at Storyteller Museum in Poland, and he's presenting on Inventors Playground Museum, Thinking for the Future of Education. Yes, Mr. Michael, you're welcome, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Wait a second, I just...
Sure, no worries, please.
Okay. Sure. Okay. So I would like to introduce you the topic of Inventors Playground, the project I'm realizing now, and also the museum thinking as a proposal for the future of education. But before I start, I would like to share just with you a little bit about my museum and my approach. You know better my story, so you can understand better also the ideas I have and where do they come from. So I created the Storyteller Museum in the year 2001 with the idea to save and promote oral traditions and intangible heritage from all over the world. At that time, we couldn't see the museum with multimedia, with different recordings. At that time, I experienced just object museums. And for that reason, to create a museum of intangible heritage, I started to conduct fieldworks in various places and cultures all around the world. During my numerous trips to all corners of the globe, I have listened to wonderful stories and music. I have watched performances and dances. I have observed customs and rituals. I have encountered people poor and rich. I have spoken to the wise and those on the path to wisdom. I have encountered journalists, artists, and politicians. And at the same time, I encountered powerless refugees. And what I had experienced and learned, I desire to transmit to the public and make use of multicultural wisdom. So I started organizing the storytelling events. I started organizing exhibitions, workshops, performances, and festivals. I invited artists from all over the world. I wanted to build multicultural bridges. So I invited children from different cultures and also from Africa. In the place where my museum is, in Warsaw, neighborhood of Warsaw, the children from Poland encounter for the first time African children. My Storyteller Museum became popular and more people started coming to experience storytelling. Children from schools and kindergartens have been coming to my headquarters. My whole approach aims at changing the school drudgery into play and enjoyment. We try to stimulate the narrative imagination throughout the varieties of sensory experiences and movement. However, in addition to pleasant impressions, we are very serious about imparting knowledge and values. And one of the main goals is for children to create and tell their stories. Throughout the years of interaction with the public, we have developed original methods of telling stories and transmitting intangible heritage. We have developed authorial creative play-based learning activities. We have elaborated the products to facilitate the transmission of cultural heritage and also methods how to use them in a meaningful way. So to stimulate the experience in telling about the heritage, we developed puppetto pillows, the funny cushions made of high quality ecological leather containing soft and comfortable feeling. So first, children need to have the sensory experience, and then they play these sensory games, and then they can listen in a completely different way. They can create in a completely different way. Their imagination is working very different than if just they sit still and they don't have movement. After half an hour or 1 hour of playing with these puppets or pillows, then they are really wondering to listen to the stories and learn about cultures or about scientists, about different topics we are presenting. Our other proper invention are modeling blocks Mubabao. They are used to create constructions. They can be used for self-assembly of unique proprietary prototypes of inventions. And there are not two same constructions they are making. From the mess, they created their own vision of invention, and they are preparing the story about. We arrived to the topic of learning experience and the museum, because museum is a place which is not confined to the classroom. In the classroom, you have to be still and listen most of the cases. Therefore, museums are essential in providing a learning environment which has significant educational potential. In the museum, we offer learners with tangible links to places and historical events to facilitate the growth and development of cultural and historical heritage. The experience that learners get from museums molds them to be all-around students with diverse understanding in various aspects of life. Exploring museums offers learners the aptitudes to partake enthusiastically in the course of gaining information. Yes, this enthusiasm is so important. In the museum, we can create this enthusiasm. And of course, we can make learners productive and learning at all levels. And therefore, one of the best ways is provide learning outside the classroom. And museum is a place which provides such an opportunity. We can experience museum in a completely different way than, and the knowledge the museum provides rather than in a classroom. Visiting museum get children and youth motivated about the subject, and they can grasp much more than sitting just still in a classroom. The future of the education is a learning ecosystem. And what I'm trying to do now is trying to create such an ecosystem, because learning ecosystem is not just reserved to schools, and learning is not coming just in schools. It can happen in museums, schools, libraries, cultural centers, and also other places. So the future is creating the network of different partners to provide really valuable solutions for learning. And I just want to tell you and share with you my experience of the project I am just now realizing. It is called Inventors Playground. It's an example of an application of museum thinking in educational process of the future. Everything started during the pandemic of COVID, where we were blocked and we had to act. And we started to organizing the storytelling sessions online. And at the same time, we connect children from Poland, but also with all my contacts I have, we started to connect children from different parts of the world. And we try to organize storytelling sessions, but at the same time, we add different topics, because I am very much interested in inventions and storytelling about inventors. So we connect children from Morocco, from different places. And also we try to invite professors of music and musicians to make it this experience of like a storytelling session full of music, full of talking about heritage, full of also different storytelling activities. So we connect children from Morocco, Poland, and then we also connect children from Uganda and Botswana. And as a topic for this Inventors Playground, we choose ocean and how to solve problems of dying of oceans and, you know, all problems related to the ocean and sustainable development. And for that reason, I developed special cushions in the shape of the whales. So also what I observed that playing with these cushions spark much more imagination and love to the ocean, to children. Maria Pomianowska, the famous musician from Poland, composed a song about the whales who travel around the oceans, and one whale fell sick because eaten plastic. And because our approach is solution-based learning, solution-based. So we said, okay, now we have a problem. The whale, small whale, child whale is feeling sick. What we can do? We ask children what to do. Try to find a solution. So the children from Poland said, well, we have to bring the whale to the hospital. But do we have a hospital for children? No. And the children from Morocco invented, with my wooden blocks I sent to them, the Fishianic, the hospital for sea animals. And when I saw these children recently in Morocco, so one of them said, when I am going to be big, grown up, I would like to really make a real hospital for whales, for sea animals. And another, his brother said, and when I be big, I would like to work in this hospital. I would like to be a vet doctor. So it has an impact on the imagination and also approach. But what we observe that the children are fully engaged really in what they are doing. I couldn't send the wooden blocks to children from Uganda. However, they also wanted to work on the topic. So their solution was to build a plane to collect plastic from the ocean. And I said, okay, because these are children from really remote area and they never go to school because there are no school in this area. So I said, use materials you've got around. So they used the local material to build this plane. Also, we engaged children from Botswana who presented their ideas, their invention, but also their cultural heritage. So we create a community of learners desiring to change the world in a positive way. In the Inventors Playground, we have developed creative play-based learning activities. We have been combining music, drama, visual art, storytelling with creative problem solving and critical thinking. With time, we developed the project. We have started including also programming and robotics. And now we are on this moment that we are creating these inventions and adding the robotics. And soon we are going to exhibit this to show that really children can have an impact and they are very positive. And these are recent invention from a community of Moroccan girls. This is a hospital, but also what is important that for us is to make aware of the local heritage and also about futuristic design. So here the hospital, they created new type of hospital in a completely different shape. And also I couldn't show you now the slides, but they also include the design, traditional Moroccan design in the designing and decorating these buildings. So the future of the education is not sitting still and to continue just to transmit information, but the future of education is engage youth in a projects in a very different way that they can feel fully engaged in what they are doing. And I think that we are trying to realize it at Inventors Playground. So we invite you to join Inventors Playground and create a community of museums which are trying to make proposals to this youth who are solutionary based, and the community which can grow and really have an impact in the future world. Because we have a wonderful science museum, we have this natural sciences museum, we have all types of museums we can connect, and each museum has developed also during the pandemic, different virtual applications. So if we connect each other, we can really be a change makers. And the power of the museum is in participating in this future learning ecosystem. So I hope we can meet together and share together a better future. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Michael. It was very, very beautiful and, very inspirational. Well, actually, let me invite Dr. Daniele, what she thinks about, the innovation that you're having. Dr. Daniele, are you with us?
Yes, I'm still here, and I was just writing in the chat because I was in complete awe, especially Michael, how you were starting with your personal journey, and I saw you're aging a little bit. So it's been a long journey for you, developing your ideas and concepts of the one bringing the act of storytelling to the front, and from there develop different methodologies to think, also to rethink also how you can do education. And I think especially the last what you were just showing, the last things which you created in the situation where we were all gobsmacked. So how do we deal with being stuck at home and not being able to travel to each other, and what can you then do? And I think it's amazing to see how you were able to reach out to all these different children and to inspire them for, and I think if we can spark things in children, I think this is where the future is, because this is showing children the possibilities. It's so immensely important because we are in a world where we are so often faced with closed doors. So I think we should keep on encouraging children to explore and to say that the world is their oyster, because they are our futures. So thank you so much. I was really touched by your work. So I'm completely honored to be in this session with you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniele. Yeah, and also thank you very much, Mr. Michael, for sharing your works with us. Well, now we have our next presenter. She is Miss Jiri Pinolesia. So she is the museum educator from Mexico. And well, yes, let us welcome her. Ms. Jiri, whenever you're ready. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I will share my presentation. And as Alejandra, well, I'm from Mexico. I will try to speak in English, but I have everything written in Spanish for this presentation today. But I will try to speak in English for you and for all the audience. I want to share part of my research about memorial museums in Mexico. So this is not a subject very playful, as we have already seen with Michael. No, this is a very, very strong issue here in Mexico, because in Mexico City, we have like more or less like more than 100 museums of all the subjects, no? Children museums, history museums, archaeological, art museums. But museums about memory, about recent facts, about our recent history, we only have 2 museums. And one very, very new site of memory who has already opened 2 years ago. So I used to work in several museums in Mexico, but now I'm doing my PhD. And in my research, I'm studying the relationship between these museums, the content of these museums, the recent history of Mexico, and the violent past, the state terrorism, and the relationship with the audience, with the visitors, with the publics. No? So in this context, we don't have, we have a lot of research, academic research, a lot of information about these recent history events, no? During the 80s, no, during the 60s, 70s, 80s, in Mexico, we have, as we can say, is a state terrorism. We have enforced disappearance. The forces, the police forces, the army, they disappear people because they belong to the guerrilla, no, to these groups that they were against the government. And this part of our history that is very recent, we don't discuss in the public arena, no? So that's why we don't have this huge museum of memory of human rights like in Chile, Argentina, or even in Europe, no? That they have this very important museum of human rights or memory. We don't have that, no? And we don't discuss this in the public arena. So this is a problem in our country. But I want to just say something very, very quickly about Museum of Memory or memorial museums. They are centered in the victims' testimonies, no? This construction of the narratives is from the affects and from the emotions. Some authors say they are a space of persuasion. There is an ethos, a pathos, and a logos. And also they have a discourse of human rights. We don't want to repeat these actions and is the never more. And as we know, all these kind of museums, they are, the origin of these museums are the museums of Holocaust. We follow the museography and the museology of the Holocaust museums, the way we exhibit the terror, the way we exhibit the pain, the way we exhibit the testimony of the victims, all the, like the main sources. So sources are from the Holocaust Museum. This is a photograph from the Yad Vashem Museum in Israel. So in Latin America, we have these networks of institutional museums of Holocaust and of state terror and enforced disappearance. So we have these politics of memory that are in Chile, Argentina, Peru, Colombia, Brazil. But in Mexico, we don't have that. We are just starting. We have already, as I just say, we have this site of memory that it opened in 2019, 2 years ago. Well, this site of memory is called Circular de Morelia and is located in Mexico City. And this site of memory was opened by the government. But today I want to share very quickly my experience working in this museum. Is another museum, and it's a museum that was constructed and that was organized at a group of women that are here. These women are mother or sisters of people who were enforced, who suffered enforced disappearance by the army and the government in Mexico City. They haven't presented neither they alive or the corpse of the people. They don't know where are they. And these women are the mothers of them, no? And this is the committee Eureka, they call themselves Eureka. And the leadership of these women, Rosario Ibarra de Piedra, she has already died 2 weeks ago, and she was senator in Mexico. She was a part of the Congress, and with the money that she received as a senator, she gave the money to the committee, and they found this museum. Well, in the memorial museums, we have several authors, and they say that we have the personalization of lost. No, we are centered in the victim, in the testimony on the victim. Also, in the museums of this kind, we work with the empathy. Hyde in 2005, she said that we have the relationship between the visitor and this testimony is mediated by the empathy. but she said this is unsettled empathy, no? And also Arnold de Simini, another very important research in this context, said that the visitors, we are, as visitors, we are secondary, how can I say in English? Sorry, we are not the one who suffered the violence. No, we are suffering the violence mediated by the testimony of these victims. And this is what happened in this space. No, here in Spanish, it says it's a space for the memory. And this wall, this yellow wall that you can see with all the photographs, all of the mothers and sisters and the women. Here in Mexico, the women who are searching for the disappearance are, most of them are women, no? And well, this is part of the museum. You go under, above the stairs and see this mural. This is the huge, no? Like the mother is hugging her son, her husband, her, we don't work part of his family, but is in a shadow because he's not here. He's not here. He has been disappeared by the law enforcement. And it's very interesting because this way of depicting the disappearance, the people who has been disappeared, is like this, like a shadow. Because when a person is disappeared, you don't know where is it. You don't have the body. You don't know if it is dead, if it is alive, or where is it. During the repression and the state terrorism in Mexico, they took all these young, very young people, very young activists that they were against the state, to clandestine jails. And then we don't know where are they. No, so this is an ongoing search and an ongoing fight against the state terrorism. This is some pictures of the museum. This is an installation with an art installation with some objects from the families. Well, this is the museum is very small because it's in a house, no, and the stores and all these spaces, and they have to short, no, they only show some parts of the previous facts that happened, no, before the disappearance. But as you can see, this is the army in the Mexico City streets in the 1968 movement, students' movement. So this is like some things that have happened prior, no? And this is another a very iconic photograph in Mexican history. Is the repression of another manifestation in 1971. And then we have this pink room that is talking about that the government says that nothing happened, everything was perfect in Mexico in the 70s, 60s, 80s. We live in a very, very nice country and nothing happened, no? But there is a lot of things happen. We have a political police, and the army and the political police, they were, now we know that they were the ones who disappeared all these very, very young people. So it's very important, this kind of museums, because we, as I say, we don't have this very public discussion, we don't have it. No, we don't speak about this part of our very recent history. And then we have a room with this installation is representing the torture. No, we have a lot of testimonies, archives, even though even the museum, this museum have a very, very important archive about all the state terrorists and testimonies of torture. So this is a very, this is all dark, and you as a visitor go inside this and you can listen, you know, in an audio, all these testimonies. And then this is, I want to share with you, this is when you visit the torture room, then you go through and then you have this space. As you can see, it seems there is a lamp, a chair, a coffee table. They represent all these people who has been disappeared, no? As if you were in a living room, in a house, no? And this room is called the waiting. The mothers are waiting, are searching, but they are waiting. Where are our sons, our brothers, our sisters, our husbands? Where are they? As you can see, this is a representation of the depictions of the people who has been disappeared as shadows. And well, this is another picture of this museum. No, as you can see, it's like a house, no? And when you are looking for all of them, where are they? And I want to share you something very interesting that is my part of my research. Here, you can see there are some visiting books. And in these books, the people who visit, the visitors, they start leaving not just the writings about the museum, about the, for example, in a lot of museums, the people say, no, the museography is very nice, or I like this museum, or I learn a lot. No, in these books happened something very, very interesting that this was part of my research. Like I will show you. This is part of a box that is depicting the women that were disappeared. This box was made by one of the daughters of these women. And then we have a room who is the fight in the streets against all these state terrorists led by these women, by this very, very brave group of women. And then we have this room, no? And this photograph is very iconic in Mexican history because in the 80s, nobody in Mexico go outside the streets and protest. That was very risky, very, very risky, no? And because the army and the police, they have disappeared all these young people, so several years very close, no? In the 70s. Well, this is a picture of the leader, and her son was disappeared. And this is Rosario Ibarra de Piedra, who is working here. Let me show you this. This is the visitor books. As you can see in the visitor books, we have the pictures, the photographs of the people who has been disappeared, no? And the people, the visitors start writing all over the page about this horrific crime. This is in Spanish, says, vivos los llevaron, vivos los queremos. In English, will we say, you took them alive, we want them alive. And this is a very iconic phrase, no? And this phrase was taken also in all over the world, in Argentina, Chile. It was said here in Mexico, and they were taken to another countries, no? And for example, they say, nunca serán olvidados, you never will be forgotten. So in these books, as you can see, the museum is writing about what is the enforced disappearance, is writing what's the museum about, but the visitors, look, they are writing all over the place. And I analyzed these books. It was part of my research. And I analyzed what the people said, what the visitors, how they make this emotional link between the, this is very interesting because the people was, they write letters to the disappeared. They didn't know who Laura Villa was. They know, the visitors know her through the photography that was in the visitor's book. And they started writing letters to her to say, for example, in this, I don't know where are you. I hope we can see you again. We share your pain. We share the pain of your family. And this state crime never has to repeat again. So it's very interesting that the visitors make this emotional link, but also make a very reflective link with the past events and with the present events. People writing in these books, they were saying, in the past, our governments, they did this, but in the present, they are still doing this. We are still having a state repression in Mexico. We are still having a very dark past and present. So they move from the past and try to explain that past in our present. And also in these books, and you can see the museum didn't put anything, just the photograph. They don't say to the people, right, what do you think about the museum? What do you think about the enforced disappearance? Nothing. They just put a blank paper and the photography, and the people start reflecting, start writing their feelings, they start writing about the present of our country, no? And it was a very, very interesting way how the visitors link to the past and link to the disappearance. For example, in this writing that I say is a letter, you can see the flower, and it says this man who has disappeared in 1999, a visitor in 2015, he writes and says, Hector, this is a flower that is in your honor. I don't know if you're still alive, but your memory is still alive. I want you to be liberated. I want you to read this short message I'm writing for you. You will never die, because today that I visit this museum, I never forget. You will be in my heart, and the crime never will be forget. No, and this is Alejandro, and I don't know if Alejandro knew Hector, but it's very interesting this dynamic that when I asked the director of the museum if he expected these responses from the public, he says no. No, we only put the book and we say, if you want to write about the museum, go ahead. But we never think that the public was very reflexive, very affective, to these things. And well, this is another pictures about photographs of the disappearance that are in the books too. Is as you can see, well, there is people who are very young, women, men, and that's it. What is the importance of this? First, is I think my research is linked to all these things that Alejandra said to us. The power of the museums is in our visitors, in our public. And the visitors' books, in this case, it was a space that they could reflect about the recent past, about these state terrorists, about the crimes, and also as I analyze all these writings, I can say that the people who visit this exhibition also was reflecting about the present of Mexico, and also the things that we don't want anymore to happen in our country and in other countries. And the other hand is that I found is that all the theory about museums, memorial museums, is here in these books. No, I see the link, the emotional link between the public, the visitors, and the theme and the subject of the museum. So when I knew what was the subject of ICOM's Museums Day, the power of museums, I was thinking, where is the power of museums? We talk about visitors, community, we talk about a lot of things about museums, but I think the power of museums is this, is be a space where the people can share and can talk about this violent past, these very difficult subjects. These in the museums of this kind, we can confront our violence past. the things we don't want to talk about it, we can talk about in a safe space like a museum. It's very hard, it's very emotional, but also is very reflective. And I can say that because all the writings that people make, they were in that sense. Also, these kind of museums share the ideal of justice. We want justice for all these families or for all these people. And the way the committee, or the group of women that fought from the 1970s until now, a lot of these women are still alive. They are still fighting against the state. No, it's not a government, it's the state, it's all the apparatus, all the state terror. They are still fighting against that. And a way of fighting is to show, through the museum, through an exhibition, through the visitor books, all these horror, all these violence, and work for never repeat. So this is part of my research. This is the things I'm working here in Mexico. No,
Excuse me.
This is a very
Ms. Satsuri, your time is up. So
yes.
If you could, wind
Yes,
up
I
the
think
presentation.
No. I
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Actually, thank you very much for sharing this presentation. It's really overwhelming. And well, I would like to request Dr. Daniel to express her views regarding the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mina. Thank you, Hatsiri, for this very empowering presentation. As said, completely different topic, of course, with Michael, but in a sense, and also combining it to what I've been talking to, and also what Alejandra has been talking to, we can talk. We can name it visitors, we can name it audiences, we can name it the public. But in a sense, we're talking about the people and the users in and outside the museum. It's when I think of the power of museums, I'm thinking of the power of people, for the people, with the people. And I think that is also what I hope for, to strive for the museums of the future, that we think more in that sense. For me, when we say something like the power of the museum, we put it outside ourselves, and I think it is in all of us. It is in those that work in the institutions, but it's also in the people that are connecting to us, that find solace in places like the museum that you were showing, Hatsiri, which is so important. It is also in the places and spaces, the projects that Michael is creating, where we create a sense of place, belonging, of creating solace and finding each other, which is so important in a world where things like justice and equity are still so far-reached ambitions. And I think we can play important roles in that. And I think the presentations today touch upon the different ways we can do that, and also show how important that is on so many different levels. So thank you so much, Hatsiri, for and very interesting research that you've been doing, and I hope you will proceed on doing so. But also, because also sharing those researchers, doing the research, but also sharing it, I think is quite important to show what the effect is of a place like that, and to take away all the biases of many people that still believe that things like that will not happen in places like museums.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. Well, let me invite our next presenter, Ms. Carolina Vargas. She is the Deputy Director of Heritage at Public and Community Education and Coordinator of the RPRM Observatory in Mexico. Welcome, Ms. Carolina.
Hi, thank you. I would like to thank first you, Mina Lama, and Mohamed Javed, and Alejandra Mosco Jaimes for their invitation to participate in this virtual conference, as well as the presence of the colleagues who are accompanying us. And well, I titled my presentation Unleashing the Power of Museums. When we're reading the call that ICOM launches this year to meet to celebrate International Museum Day with the theme, The Power of Museums, I find this sentence forceful and hopeful. Museums have the power to transform the world around us. But however, the phrase that makes me feel summoned and excited to meet you today is the following. We want to explore the potential of museums to bring out positive change in their communities. This phrase resonates with me because it denotes the need for change. It invites me to take action, to assume my responsibility in this process, and it challenged me to venture out and explore. To begin this exploration, I would like to make explicit some premises from which I start, so as not to assume that everyone here interprets life, the world, museums, and our relationships with them in the same way. And these premises are: museums do not have the power to transform the world around us. The people who create museums do. Not all of us who create museums as workers or visitors have the same decision-making power over what a museum will be. The people who create museums have knowledge, ideas, emotions, beliefs, judgments, and prejudices that are reflected in museums, whether we are aware of this or not. The people who create museums have the potential, and some of them have the power to bring out positive changes in the museums themselves and in their communities, but also the potential and the power to resist change. The people who create museums have the responsibility to cause changes that contribute to the benefit and well-being of people and communities. The power of museums depends on the people who have power in them. Presenting their collections and speeches in a univocal and impersonal way lead us to use that power to indoctrinate and make our responsibility in this act invisible. With these premises in mind, I have a lot of questions about the people who create museums. Are we aware of our power and assume our responsibility? Are we looking for changes? And if so, what do we want to change and how? What do we mean by positive changes? What do we understand by well-being? For the benefit of whom do we do what we do? And what images come to mind when we think of people and communities? Who has the power in museums and who benefits from this being so? What and how are the power relations that are exercised in museums in relation to their visitors and also within them as work centers? What are we willing to change in ourselves and our practices to provoke and project the positive changes we want in the world? As a feminist museum educator, I would like to use ICOM's invitation as a pretext to share the sense in which I have explored the potential of museums to implement Sustainable Development Goal 5 that the United Nations organization has named Gender Equality, and on the topic of community building through education from my workspace. First, I consider education in museums as the main tool that these spaces have to contribute to community building, participation, and social justice. However, the effectiveness of this tool will depend on the concepts of education, teaching, and learning that are behind this work. And also, there are many paradigms and theories in education. I think that in order to make education a tool that contributes to these ends, it is more useful to adopt any educational position that allows us to, number one, abandon the idea of teaching and replace it with that of facilitating learning. Two, taking into account that learning is self-generated and arises from problems perceived as real and relevant to the learner through the discovery of an assimilated truth from personal experience. Therefore, knowledge cannot be transmitted directly to another person. And three, conceive education as a process that permanently requires a critical, reflective, and transformative posture that inevitably leads to action, instead of a simple exercise of information or transmission of knowledge. It is in the formative and critical character of education where its power lies. And it is in this sense that education in museums has enormous potential, since due to its non-formal nature, it is not tied to any school or museum curriculum. Therefore, it can set clear and explicit objectives focused on people and communities. Think of education in museums as the set of activities and processes that facilitate the creation of bonds of emotions, sensations, values, knowledge, and attitudes that allow people to interpret what is exhibited, take a stand on it, and give their own meaning to the accumulated human experience, using different disciplines, objects, languages, forms of knowledge, forms of relationships, etc., as means. That allows us to unleash their full potential to form people capable of exercise their cultural rights, recognizing the importance of their own perspectives in the construction of a fairer museum project and society, and to broaden the awareness of the place they occupy in the social natural worlds, of their responsibility in its construction, as well as their ability to transform the natural environment and the community they belong to for their own benefit. Okay. In the Patrimonial Education, Publics and Community Subdirectorate, we have committed ourselves that our projects and activities are crossed by at least these three axes: the coloniality, inclusion of people with disabilities, and feminism. With the decolonial axis, we propose to make visible and question the effects of European and American coloniality of power, knowledge, and being, and of homogenizing nationalism. Recognize other knowledge and ways of thinking about the world as valid. Liberate museums from the monopoly of scientific knowledge. Make an ethical historical review of the way of considering the humanity of people. Eliminate inequalities and hierarchies mounted under the pretext of the idea of race, class, sex, ethnicity, etc. With the axis of inclusion, we want to question ourselves, the way we relate to people who have been labeled as having a disability, the way in which the medical and capacitist approach has contributed to discriminate against and exclude these people, and explore the scope and possibilities of replacing this approach with a social approach. The way in which we exercise empathic listening and promote the participation of people with disabilities as creators of culture and not just as consumers, considering them as political subjects instead of subjects of paternalistic beneficence. With feminism, we want to show the inequalities, oppressions, and violence that culturally and historically have been exerted on women, as well as the androcentric biases that this has caused in all areas of human life. Carry out collective, organized, specific, and simultaneous action in and from our workplaces in collaboration with the citizens to build a life free of violence for women. And it is on this third axis that I would like to deepen things. Parallel to the work of the Subdirectorate of Heritage Education, Publics and Communities, we carry out the work of the Raquel Padilla Ramos Museums Observatory. To put them in context, it is important that they know that in Mexico, 11 men commit femicide every day. And on November 7, 2019, our colleague, Raquel Padilla Ramos, a researcher at the INA Center in the state of Sonora, an activist for the defense of the Yaqui people and women, was murdered by her romantic partner. And in response to this femicide, a group of museum educators created the observatory that today bears her name. Over time, women from other professions and jobs at the National Institute of Anthropology and History have joined different projects of the observatory, as well as museums workers who belong to other cultural institutions and women who work independently in museums and culture. The general objective of this observatory is develop and implement strategies in museum spaces that affect the prevention and eradication of different types of violence against women. And we have three particular objectives. Generate actions that represent women equitably and free of gender stereotypes in museological discourses. Promote the construction of spaces free of violence against women and in and from museums. And make visible the contributions of women in museums work in the cultural sector and in the history of our country. Some of the actions that we have carried out from the observatory to meet these objectives are the calls for orange museums within the framework of the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and violet museums within the framework of International Women's Day. We participate in the restructuring of museums scripts and temporary exhibitions. The most relevant case was the restructuring of the Museum of the Archaeological Zone of Xochitecatl in Tlaxcala, reopened in March of this year, becoming the first and only INA museum with a script made completely with a gender perspective and with non-sexist language on their levels. Also, we participate in educational projects, advice and accompaniment to museums in the project for the incorporation of the gender perspective and the construction of spaces free of violence against women in INA workplaces, museums, and archaeological zones. This was implemented in the state of Michoacán in 2021. And we create the citizen call Laboratoria Mujeres en el Museo. At the observatory, we believe that by becoming aware of the messages transmitted through the representations of women in museums or their absence, as well as their impact